A school bus full of children recorded something that morning. They didn't know it. The driver didn't know it. But the camera kept rolling. It captured a truck parked on a quiet street. Ordinary. Unremarkable. Hours later, a mother of 5 was gone, and everyone thought she had simply walked away. They were wrong. That truck was the last thing she ever saw. The case against Michelle Troconis will remain difficult to prove for nearly 5 years. Not because of a lack of evidence, but because of one detail everyone overlooked: the assumption that without a body, without a witness, without a confession, the story of what happened to Jennifer Dullos could not be told. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what went wrong, why it mattered, and how cameras caught what no one else saw. The camera never lies, except when it does. In an age where nearly every public place has eyes, convenience stores, traffic intersections, ATMs, private homes, surveillance footage has become one of the most powerful tools in criminal investigations. Police departments across the country increasingly rely on video evidence to identify suspects, establish timelines, verify witness accounts, and present evidence in court. In many cases, video can mean the difference between a case going cold and getting a conviction. But video footage is not always open and shut proof. Sometimes it can be ambiguous. A camera might catch someone at a location, but fail to record what actually transpired. Lighting, angles, and audio clarity all influence how footage is interpreted. There is a growing cultural belief that the camera does not lie, but in reality, video can be misleading, whether intentionally or unintentionally. A single camera angle may show what looks like a threatening gesture, but without sound or additional context, it might completely miss what led up to that moment. What follows are 5 cases where cameras capture crimes in ways no one expected, sometimes solving cases, sometimes creating more questions, and always revealing the uncomfortable truth about what happens when we are being watched. Case 1. The photographs under the carpet. Brenda Schaefer lived in Louisville, Kentucky. By all accounts, her life was ordinary, predictable, safe. She worked as an administrative assistant, attended church regularly, and had recently begun a relationship with a man named Mel Ignatow. Friends described him as charming, successful, and attentive. No one expected that night to be different. But in September 1988, Brenda told a friend something that would later become critical evidence. She was going to break up with Mel Ignatow. She had discovered things about him, things she did not share in detail, that made her want to end the relationship. The friend would later testify that Brenda seemed nervous, but not frightened. She was simply ready to move on. On the night of September 24th, 1988, at around 7 p.m., Brenda Schaefer left her apartment. She told her roommate she was going to meet Mel Ignatow. At first, it did not seem alarming. They had been dating for 2 years. Meetings were routine. When Brenda did not return that night, her roommate waited. By morning, she called police. Missing persons cases involving adults are common, and most resolve themselves within 48 hours. But this one would not. There was one detail that did not sit right with investigators. Mel Ignatow, when questioned, seemed too calm. He acknowledged meeting Brenda. He said they had dinner, talked, and then he dropped her off at a shopping center around 10 p.m. He claimed she wanted to run errands alone. At the time, this explanation was dismissed as insignificant. People change plans, relationships, and adults disappear voluntarily. But later, it would become impossible to ignore. Police checked the shopping center. No one remembered seeing Brenda that night. No store receipts. No ATM transactions. Nothing. Criminal psychologists later noted something important about Mel Ignatow's behavior during those initial interviews. He offered information freely, sometimes before being asked. He provided a detailed timeline. He expressed concern but did not demand updates on the investigation. This was not panic. It was control. When people are genuinely distressed about missing a loved one, they often fixate on details. What are police doing? Have you checked this hospital? Can you release a photo? Ignatow did none of these things. Instead, he waited. He watched. He let the investigation move at its own pace, confident that nothing would connect him to whatever had happened. Months passed. Then Ignatow made a strategic error. During an interview, He mentioned an ex-girlfriend named Mary and Shore. He suggested she might have information about Brenda's disappearance. Whether he intended to deflect suspicion or simply could not resist involving someone from his past, the mention changed everything. Mary and Shore came forward, and what she told police was devastating. She said Ignato had killed Brenda Schaefer. She said she was there. She described Brenda tied to a coffee table in Ignato's home. She described taking photographs while Ignato tortured her. She described helping bury the body behind her own house. Police faced a problem. Mary and Shore was an accomplice. Her testimony alone might not convict Ignato, especially given her involvement. Prosecutors made a calculation. They charged Shore only with evidence tampering in exchange for her testimony against Ignato. They now had a body excavated from behind Shore's house, and a witness claiming Ignato was responsible. But they still lacked physical evidence linking Ignato to the crime. Mel Ignato sold his home to pay for a strong defense. His lawyer argued that no physical evidence connected Ignato to the body. Police had worn a wire and recorded Ignato talking with Shore about a burial spot, but the recording did not mention a body specifically. Shore had described photographs of the torture, but no one could produce these supposed photos. And the body had been buried behind Shore's house, not Ignato's. Perhaps, the defense argued, Shore herself had killed her ex's new lover out of jealousy. In December 1991, the jury bought this argument. Mel Ignato was acquitted of all charges related to Brenda Schaefer's death. He walked out of the courtroom free. A few months after the acquittal, contractors were laying new carpet in the house Ignato had sold to pay for his legal defense. They pulled up the floor in one room, and underneath, they found something Ignato had left behind: undeveloped film. The contractors turned the film over to authorities. When developed, the images showed Brenda Schaefer tied to a coffee table exactly as Mary and Shore had described. They showed sexual crimes, with Ignato clearly identifiable even when his face was not in frame. They showed everything except the actual moment of death. Why Ignato had left the film under the carpet was a mystery. Perhaps he forgot it. Perhaps he thought no one would look. Perhaps he simply could not bring himself to destroy the evidence of what he had done. The truth was far more calculated than anyone expected. This was not an impulsive crime. It was planned. Ignato had brought Mary and Shore to witness and photograph. He had kept the images as trophies. And when acquitted, he believed he had gotten away with it forever. But the law contained a problem. Ignato had been acquitted of murder, under double jeopardy protections. He could not be retried, no matter how ironclad the proof against him. The photographs could not undo the verdict. Authorities charged Ignato with perjury for lying during his testimony. He spent 11 years in prison for it. After his release, he retired to a house not far from the one where he had killed Brenda Schaefer. Years later, in that new house, he tripped and fell on a glass coffee table. He bled out and died. The case left behind more questions than answers. For Brenda's family, the photographs provided confirmation of what they had always known, but the acquittal meant justice remained incomplete. For those involved, nothing was ever the same. Do you believe Mel Ignato's decision to keep those photographs was driven by narcissism or by a need to relive the crime? What do you think investigators missed during the initial investigation? Case 2, the man who wanted to be arrested. Valdo Callicane lived in Nottingham, England. He was a university student, studying mechanical engineering. By outward appearances, his life was structured, academic, predictable, but inside, something was wrong. He had been arrested twice in one 24-hour period a year earlier for banging down two neighbors' front doors. Police took no further action. No one expected that a man asking for help would be ignored until it was too late. On May 31st, 2021, at around 5 p.m., a bearded man wearing all black stood outside Thames House in London, the headquarters of MI5. Despite it being a warm day, he was fully covered. He pressed the intercom. The head of physical security at MI5, referred to in documents only as Witness G, spoke to the man through the intercom. The man claimed to have information regarding a case. But then he said something strange. He wanted to be arrested. He would not give any more information. Security protocol required calling police. At 5:15 p.m., Metropolitan Police officers arrived. Body-worn cameras recorded everything. The footage shows PC Graham Foster and a colleague approaching the man, who stood in the shade as families with children and pushing prams walked past. The interaction was brief. The officer asked the man to take his hands out of his pockets and provide his name. The man complied. He gave his name, Valdo Callicane. The officer checked police records. Callicane was known, but not wanted. He had no warning signals. Asked if he had been arrested before, Callicane replied, "Not really." Then he corrected himself. "I had been arrested once." At the time, this was dismissed as insignificant. A man with a minor record, making a strange request, then leaving peacefully. Criminal psychologists later noted something important about this behavior. Callicane was not acting erratically. He was calm, compliant, coherent. The officer later testified, "I was content with the response that he gave. I was content by his demeanor, his mannerism. He did not seem agitated." But there is another way to interpret calm compliance in someone asking to be arrested. This was not panic. It was control. Callicane knew something was wrong with him. He knew he needed to be contained, and he was making a rational decision to seek containment before he hurt someone. The request itself was the symptom and the warning. Sophie Cartwright, representing the survivors of what would come later, asked the officer a pointed question during the inquiry. "Why didn't you ask Callicane a question about why he wanted to be arrested?" This is a member of the public who has attended the home of MI5. It is significant. Would you agree that a member of the public is asking to be arrested at MI5? The officer responded, "The reason I was there, again, trying to build a rapport with a member of the public and to ascertain did he want to speak to the police." And he replied clearly that he didn't want to speak to police. There wasn't anything that he wished to tell us about. So I was happy with the response he gave me. The officers did not ask where he was going when his Uber arrived moments later. They let him leave. 2 years later, on June 13th, 2023, Valdo Callicane walked through Nottingham armed with a knife. He killed 19-year-old Barnaby Weber. He killed 19-year-old Grace O'Malley Kumar. He killed 65-year-old Ian Coates. He injured 3 others. The attacks were random. The victims had no connection to him or to each other. When police finally apprehended him, the body-worn camera footage from 2021 became evidence in an inquiry examining how a man who explicitly asked to be arrested went on to kill 3 people. The truth was far more calculated than anyone expected. Callicane was suffering from mental illness. He knew it. He sought help in the most direct way he could imagine, by going to country security headquarters and asking to be taken into custody. When that failed, when officers treated him as a routine contact and sent him on his way, he was left to manage his condition alone. He was eventually found guilty of manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility and received an indefinite hospital order. But the body camera footage raised uncomfortable questions. What if the officers had asked one more question? What if they had explored why someone would travel to London, stand outside of MI5, and request arrest? What if they had treated the request itself as information rather than as a problem to be resolved by watching him leave? The inquiry continues. The families of Barnaby Weber, Grace O'Malley Kumar, and Ian Coates wait for answers. The officers who encountered Callicane in 2021 must live with knowing they were the last people with a chance to intervene before 3 people died. For those involved, nothing was ever the same. The body camera footage that exonerated the officers of any wrongdoing also documented the moment when a man asked for help and was turned away, politely, professionally, and with absolutely no understanding of what he was really requesting. Do you believe the officer should have done more? Or was this an impossible situation where Callicane's calm demeanor masked what was coming? What do you think investigators missed in that 5-minute interaction? Case 3. The school bus that solved a murder. Jennifer Dullos lived in New Canaan, Connecticut. She was a mother of 5 children, in the midst of a contentious divorce from her estranged husband, Fotis Dullos. By all accounts, her life was complicated. Legal battles, financial disputes, custody arrangements. But she was safe in her home, surrounded by her family. No one expected that morning to be different. On May 24th, 2019, at around 7 a.m., Jennifer Dullos was at her home. Her children were with her. The day was ordinary. But at 7:03 a.m., a camera on the Merritt Parkway captured a red Toyota Tacoma passing a rest area. The truck belonged to an employee of Fotis Dullos. Later, prosecutors would allege that Fotis took the truck and used it to drive to New Canaan. At 7:31 a.m., a residential security camera recorded something unusual. A person wearing dark clothing with a hood pulled low over their face pedaled a bicycle in the direction of Jennifer's house. The bike appeared to match one owned by Fotis Dullos. At 7:40 a.m., a school bus equipped with cameras drove past a turnout a few miles from Jennifer's home. The bus camera recorded the red Toyota Tacoma parked in that turnout. The children inside did not know they had just become witnesses to a timeline that would determine the outcome of a murder investigation. There was one detail that did not sit right with investigators. Jennifer Dullos was supposed to drive her children to school that morning. She never arrived. When family members checked on her, they found her home in order, but Jennifer was gone. Her car was there. Her purse was there. Her phone was there. She was not. At the time, the missing person report was treated as concerning, but not necessarily criminal. Adults sometimes leave, but the blood spatter in the garage, which appeared to have been cleaned, suggested something else entirely. The Hartford Police Department operates a network of more than 1,000 cameras across the city, known as the Capital City Command Center, or C4. It uses pan/tilt/zoom cameras, license plate readers, and ShotSpotter devices to allow analysts to synthesize vast amounts of data into actionable intelligence. On the night of May 24th, between 7:31 p.m. and 7:50 p.m., those cameras capture a man identified as Fotis Dullos driving a black Ford pickup registered to his luxury home building company. He was seen pulling over on Albany Avenue, roughly 20 miles from his Farmington home, and placing black bags in trash cans. At another point, he placed a FedEx envelope into a storm drain. Inside the bags, authorities found zip ties, gloves, a bra and a mop handle. A paper towel and a plastic bag had blood-like stains on them. In the envelope, investigators discovered altered license plates. Many items had Jennifer's DNA. Some had DNA matching Fotis Dullos and Michelle Trecconi's, his girlfriend at the time. Criminal psychologists later noted something important about the behavior captured on these cameras. The stops were purposeful. The items were distributed across multiple locations. This was not panic. It was control. Someone methodically disposing of evidence understood exactly what they were doing. Michelle Trecconi's later told authorities she was with Fotis Dullos when he made the stops. She was not sure what he was doing, she said, but she was there. Everything changed when investigators stitched together the video timeline, the school bus camera, the residential security camera, the traffic cameras, the license plate readers. Together, they told a story that no single witness could provide. Prosecutors had no eyewitnesses linking anyone to Jennifer's death. Her body has never been found, but they had hours of video culled from security and surveillance cameras across the state. They could place Fotis Dullos in New Canaan at the time of Jennifer's disappearance. They could place the truck. They could place the bike. They could place the disposal of evidence. Investigators focused their attention on Fotis Dullos and Michelle Trecconi's. On paper, it made sense. Fotis was in the middle of a contentious divorce. He had financial motives. He had access to vehicles. He was seen disposing of items with Jennifer's DNA. But something did not add up. Fotis maintained his innocence. His lawyer argued the man in the truck could have been his client, but the face was fuzzy and the license plate was not clear. A jury could conclude that was Mr. Dullos, the lawyer acknowledged, but that is a troublesome set of facts for us. In January 2020, Fotis Dullos died by suicide after being charged with murder. Michelle Trecconi's stood trial alone. The truth was far more calculated than anyone expected. This was not an impulsive crime. It was planned. The truck, the bike, the timing, the disposal, the altered plates. Every step required forethought, and every step was captured by a camera somewhere. In March 2024, Michelle Trecconi's was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, tamper with evidence, and hindering prosecution. She faces up to 50 years in prison. The conviction was built almost entirely on video evidence. Grant Fredericks, a forensic video analyst who has taught for the FBI, described the case as reflecting an increasingly common reality for law enforcement. Because of the ubiquity of cameras, every camera is a potential witness, and these witnesses have an accurate recollection of time, date, movement, and a visual record. Jennifer Dulos's body has never been found. A judge issued her declaration of death in 2023. Her 5 children grow up without her. The surveillance footage that helped convict Ciccone also documented the last known movements of a woman who simply disappeared from her own life. For those involved, nothing was ever the same. The cameras that solved the case also ensure that Jennifer's final hours, whatever they contained, would never be fully known. Do you believe Michelle Ciccone knew what Fotis Dulos was doing during those stops, or was she an unwitting participant? What do you think investigators missed by never finding Jennifer's body? Case 4. The photographs that couldn't be used. In 1988, an 18-year-old woman from Linwood, Washington, reported that she had been raped. Her attacker, she said, was a man named Mark O'Leary. He had worn gloves and a mask. He had forced her to brush her teeth and shower afterward. He had brought wet wipes for further cleanup. He had taken her clothes when he left. By all accounts, the crime was methodical, planned, difficult to prove. No one expected that reporting the crime would make her the criminal. When police investigated, they found very little evidence. O'Leary had been careful. Without physical proof, without witnesses, without confession, the case could not proceed. The woman had only her word. But instead of closing the investigation, police took action against the accuser. They charged her with making a false report. Her public defender recommended she plead guilty. She did. She paid a $500 fine. She received court-mandated mental health counseling, not for trauma, but for what the system deemed false accusations. There was one detail that should have concerned investigators. O'Leary had told the woman during the attack that if she reported the rape, he would release photographs of her online. At the time, this was dismissed as an empty threat. The words of a man trying to control his victim. Later, it would become impossible to ignore. In 2009, O'Leary raped again. In 2010, he broke into another woman's home and attempted rape. Then he succeeded one more time in 2011. This time, police had enough evidence to link the cases. They obtained a warrant and searched O'Leary's home. They found a memory card. On it were 100 photographs O'Leary had taken during that first rape in 1988. He had kept them all those years, trophies, leverage, proof of his crimes. The photographs showed everything. They showed the woman. They showed what O'Leary did to her. They showed that her report had been true all along. Criminal psychologists later noted something important about O'Leary's behavior. He destroyed other evidence meticulously. He wore gloves. He used wet wipes. He took clothes. But he kept photographs. This was not panic. It was control. The photographs served multiple purposes. Trophies to relive the crime, leverage to prevent reporting, proof of his power over his victims. He kept them because he believed he would never be caught. When police found the photographs, everything changed. They now had evidence that the 1988 rape had occurred exactly as the woman described. They also had evidence that the system had failed her, had fined her, had required counseling, had labeled her a liar while the real rapist remained free. The woman, now years older, learned that the photographs existed. She learned that O'Leary had kept them. She learned that her $500 fine had been paid to a system that protected her attacker. The truth was far more calculated than anyone expected. O'Leary did not just commit crimes. He documented them. He weaponized the documentation. And when the system failed to believe his victim, he continued raping for years. Police reimbursed the woman the $500 she had paid in fines. She sued and won additional compensation. But no amount of money could undo the years she spent labeled as someone who made false reports. Mark O'Leary was sentenced to 327 years and 6 months in prison. His next parole hearing is scheduled for July 2283. The case left behind more questions than answers. How many victims do not report because they fear being charged themselves? How many rapists keep photographs that could prove their guilt? How many memory cards sit undiscovered in homes across the country? For the woman who reported in 1988, nothing was ever the same. She had done everything right. She reported immediately. She cooperated with investigators. She told the truth. And the truth cost her $500 and a court record until photographs found on a memory card years later proved she was not lying after all. Do you believe the police who charged a woman with false reporting should face consequences? Or was this a reasonable conclusion given the evidence at the time? What do you think investigators missed when they decided she was lying? Case 5. The Toddler and the Two Boys. James Bulger lived in Bootle, Merseyside, England. He was 2 years old. His life was ordinary, predictable, safe. He went to the shopping center with his mother on February 12, 1993. He held her hand. He looked at the displays. He was, by every account, a normal toddler experiencing a normal day. No one expected that moment to be the last time his mother would see him alive. On the afternoon of February 12, 1993, at around 3:30 p.m., security cameras at the Strand Shopping Center captured a grainy image that would become imprinted on the national psyche. 2 boys were walking with James Bulger. James's hand was trustingly placed in theirs. The boys were leading him out of the shopping center. At first, it did not seem alarming. Security footage showed 3 boys walking together. No one intervened. No one called police. People who saw them assumed the older boys were brothers or babysitters, looking after a younger sibling while their mother shopped. There was one detail that should have concerned someone. The boys were not heading toward the exits where parents typically leave. They were walking James through a mall, then out into the streets of Liverpool, then along a route that would cover 2 miles. At the time, this was dismissed as insignificant. Children wander. Groups of boys are noisy and aimless. No one thought to ask where they were going. Later, it would become impossible to ignore. Investigators would trace the route and discover that James was seen by 38 people as he was marched across North Liverpool. Some even intervened, asking the boys questions. They were fobbed off with lies. "He's our brother. We're taking him home. Everything is fine." No one called police. Criminal psychologists later noted something important about the behavior of Robert Thompson and John Venables, both age 10. They did not panic. They did not run. They walked James through public streets, past dozens of witnesses, and responded to questions with calm explanations. This was not panic. It was control. 2 children, barely into double digits in age, had already learned how to manage adults. Mark Thomas, a former Press Association journalist who covered the case, later reflected, "When we saw those blurry images, the assumption was that these were boys in their teens, maybe 14 or 15, and that was because no one quite appreciated how tiny James was. We were hoping it was some sort of silly prank, and it would all be resolved. Not in our darkest nightmares did we think these 2 young boys committed murder." The security footage from the Strand Shopping Center was grainy. It was black and white. It showed 3 small figures walking together, one smaller than the others. But that footage became the most important piece of evidence in the investigation. Without it, police might never have known that James left the mall with anyone. Without it, they might have searched for an adult abductor. Retired Detective Superintendent Albert Kirby, who led the murder inquiry, later explained, "The biggest thing we all faced as the evidence was coming in, the CCTV images followed by the various sightings, was having to accept the possibility that the people who murdered James were very young. We thought, from what happened with the body, that it had to be the work of an adult. It was very difficult to get our minds around that potential situation." On Valentine's Day, 1993, all hope of finding little James was extinguished. A group of schoolboys playing near a railway line in the Walton area came across his body. The toddler had been attacked with house bricks and a metal bar. His body had been laid over the railway track to make it appear as if he had been killed by a passing train. The brutality of the killing seemed incomprehensible, and when police arrested Thompson and Venables, the incomprehensibility only deepened. Mark Thomas, who was among the first reporters to see them in court, said, "I will never forget it. I remember being just absolutely shocked by how ordinary they looked. You would walk past them in the street and not give them a second glance. They were not big lads. They were small even for 10-year-olds. They looked so harmless. The truth was far more calculated than anyone expected. When Venable's mother ordered him to tell officers the truth, he confessed, "I did kill James. Will you tell his mummy I'm sorry?" The confession, combined with the CCTV footage and the witness sightings, built a case that would convict the youngest murderers in a century. In November 1993, Thompson and Venables were convicted at Preston Crown Court. They spent 8 years in Young Offenders Institutes before being released in 2001 with new identities. Thompson, now 42, has not reoffended. Venables was recalled to prison in 2010, and again in 2017 after being caught with child sex abuse images. James's mother, Denise Fergus, has spent her life fighting for justice for her son. His brother Michael, born after James died, said of the killers, "They took away my older brother, who I never got to meet. I would have loved to have looked up to him, asked him questions, talked to him about exams, cars, going to bars, normal stuff. But because of those two, I never got the chance. They robbed me of my childhood. In a nutshell, the case left behind more questions than answers. How could two 10-year-olds commit such violence? How could 38 people see 3 boys walking and never intervene? How could a grainy security camera image change the way an entire nation thought about childhood? For those involved, nothing was ever the same. The cameras that caught James leaving the mall also captured the end of innocence. The moment when the world had to accept that children could kill, that evil did not require adulthood, that the face of murder could look as ordinary as a 10-year-old boy. Do you believe Thompson and Venables understood what they were doing, or were they children who committed an act they could not comprehend? What do you think investigators missed about the warning signs that might have existed before that day? Conclusion: the eye that watches, the truth that remains. Surveillance footage has become an indispensable tool in criminal investigations. It can exonerate the innocent, identify the guilty, and reveal the truth in ways that human memory often cannot. But its power is matched by its complexity. For every clear confession caught on tape, there's another clip open to interpretation, misunderstanding, or manipulation. In the cases we have examined today, cameras served multiple purposes. They documented a toddler being led to his death by 2 children. They captured a man disposing of evidence after killing a mother of 5. They recorded a future triple killer asking for help and being sent away. They preserved photographs that proved a rape occurred, even after the system punished the victim for reporting it. They sat under a carpet, undeveloped, waiting to reveal a truth that could no longer be prosecuted. Grant Fredericks, the forensic video analyst, noted that because of the ubiquity of cameras, every camera is a potential witness, and these witnesses have an accurate recollection of time, date, movement, and a visual record. But he also acknowledged what the other cases demonstrate. Video evidence must be interpreted, contextualized, and understood within a larger framework. A camera may capture the moment, but it never captures the full story on its own. Adam Schwartz of the Electronic Frontier Foundation raised concerns about the rapid growth of video in criminal investigations, describing it as increasingly alarming. He pointed to errors linked to video technology, including facial recognition software that performs poorly when identifying people who are not white men, and license plate readers that have led to wrongful arrests. The debate between security and privacy continues. In Texas, where both individual freedom and law enforcement are deeply valued, finding the balance is an ongoing challenge. Critics argue that increased reliance on surveillance disproportionately affects marginalized communities or encourages over-policing. Others raise ethical concerns about using AI-driven facial recognition in conjunction with surveillance footage, especially when errors can result in wrongful arrests. But for the families of Jennifer Dullos, Brenda Schaefer, James Bulger, and the victims of Mark O'Leary and Valdo Callicane, the debate is academic. The cameras captured what happened. The question is whether anyone was watching, whether anyone understood, whether anyone acted on what the footage revealed. If you are interested in the psychology and stories behind real crimes, subscribe to Behind the Crime Files. New cases every week. After examining these 5 cases, Do you believe surveillance cameras ultimately help or hinder justice? What do you think investigators miss in the cases where footage existed but was not properly interpreted?